Hi, welcome to the North Alabama Agriplex's Seed Starting Lunch and Learn. So I'm glad you're here. We're going to learn about starting vegetable or herb or flower transplants for your garden. And my name is Rachel Dawsey. I'm the director here at the Agriplex. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see my PowerPoint. Onto here. The Lunch and Learn series is a monthly series that we do with the Agriplex. We started going completely virtual once the pandemic started, but in the coming year, we'll probably continue to do this. So I have been starting seeds for many, many years. I think 2002, 2003 was when I started. So and since I'm hooked and I keep starting my own seeds. Why would you want to start your transplants? One reason is because it's cheaper. You can buy stevia plants for $4 a plant, or you could buy 100 seeds for $2.79. So could definitely save you money in the long run. Also, you can get unique plants. These fish peppers on the left were some I tried one time. The sunrise bumblebee tomatoes on the right are one of my favorites that we've tried as well. So you can get unique varieties if you start them yourself. Also, you're not limited by planting time. If you want to do some really early or an unusual time, you have access to those plants whenever you want them. Another reason is, like I said, I'm just kind of hooked. It's a miracle every spring for me to start transplanting and starting seeds from scratch, because it's just a miracle that one little seed can become a plant. This is a time-lapse video that I have that you can see of a seedling growing. If I can make it big for you. You'll see the first thing that happens is the root grows down. The seed coat is breaking open. You'll see these little cotyledon leaves coming out. Those are seed leaves. That one's a dicotyledon because you'll see it's got two sides. So the mystery and the amazing journey of a seed, and that one is a bean. So what seeds do you need to plant? You might have some really old seeds that it's been a long time since you've planted them. You can do a seed viability test, which is very simple. It's just taking a wet paper towel and you want to put your seeds on there and keep them wet and moist and see if they start to sprout. After a few days, if nothing's happened to them, they're probably not still going to germinate for you. So you probably can toss them. You'll see on the screen here, there's maybe half of the seeds have sprouted and the other half have not. And so that's the way you know if they're good or not. Here's a chart that tells years. Onions are usually just good for about a year, but most other ones are good for at least 2 years. Tomato plants are good for at least 4 years. Lettuce, 2 to 5 years. Muskmelons or cantaloupes, 5 years. So a lot of seeds you can save for a long time. What kind of seeds do you want to transplant? Well, typically carrots and beets, radishes, anything that is a root crop typically does not transplant very well. But for cool season, broccoli, cabbage, head lettuces, Brussels sprouts, cauliflowers, collards, kale, onions, all of those you can transplant easily. Onions, kale too. Kale's when we do a lot of transplant stuff. Warm season, tomatoes and peppers, many different kinds of herbs and flowers and eggplants all do well from transplant. Usually Corn, okra, beans, and peas we think of as ones that you would start in the ground and they would do better. But actually now you'll see some okra and some corn sold in the stores now. You can go ahead and start those from seeds indoors and do them as transplants, especially if you want to get an early start. But typically those are easier to do from seed in the garden because you usually just plant so many of them. But peas is when you can start them, go ahead and get them started even just germinating, soaking them in water, putting them in moist sawdust, and then going ahead and once they've germinated, planting them, and that'll just speed up the process. Cucurbits, which include squash, pumpkins, melons, and cucumbers, typically do better if you start them in the ground. But if you want a head start, you can try them from transplants. But remember not to disturb the roots because they don't do well if the roots are disturbed. Wildflowers, you can definitely do from seedlings. But remember, especially perennial wildflowers, they have a really deep roots base. And so they need deep pots. We got some seed trays that are maybe 5 inches. And that has worked really well for us with milkweeds and other perennials that have really long roots. What kind of containers do you want? You could use about anything. This shows the little peat pellets that you add water and they grow. These are seed blocks that you can cut. Toilet paper rolls. This is an expensive seed starting tray. One of my favorites is 1/2-gallon containers, like an orange juice container. So you can use most anything, but most important is it has to have a hole. My favorite now, either with my old age or as I've become busier in life, is to just go ahead and put them in these little cell trays because I can start tomatoes in these and I don't have to transplant them again. If I started them in something small, I would have to put them in something bigger before they go into the garden. So you have to work with them twice, or maybe even 3 times. And so I like to just use these seed cell packs and put them in a tray with no holes, and then we put that under our lights, and so that catches the water and it's not going to drip down on the lights. But my seed trays, you can see the little seed packs, they do have holes in them. Here's one I started today, and it's just using a little orange juice container. You can tell I punched holes in it. I taped the side up, and use moist soil. It's important to use moist soil because that'll give your little seedlings an advantage. We usually mix water in a tub or a Rubbermaid and keep soil in there. And then can you tell I filled them all the way up to the top? You don't want to leave any room down below. You want to fill it as full up to the top as you can with soil because the soil will compact down. How deep do I plant my seeds? Typically, it's about twice as deep as it is wide. So these are tiny little lavender seeds, and they're actually bigger. That's in my palm, so it's enlarged a little bit. But I went and poked holes in here and put my seeds in here. My package says 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, which these are tiny sides, so 1/4 seeds. So 1/4 inch is definitely right. So make sure you look on the back of your package when in question, or just remember twice as deep as your seed is wide. So that's pretty tiny. Oh, and I did label them. Make sure you label them because even if you think there's no way I'm going to forget what's planted here, it's very easy to forget what is planted there. What to pot them in as far as your soil mix goes. Any kind of soil starting mix, you don't need fertilizer when they're starting. You can add fertilizer once they have their first true leaves. And so any kind of soil starting mix, you can make your own using perlite, vermiculite, and peat. I had a friend that would always put worm castings on top of his so that after they started growing, they would have a little shot of nutrition. So as long as it doesn't have any big clumps in it, because those big clumps will cause your seedlings not to come up. Let's see. I usually talk mainly about lighting because lighting is most important for your seedlings. But these are some green beans we've been growing in our east-facing window, and they've been doing pretty well. So if you have a really, really bright light, they might make it, but most of the time you want a light set up. So these are the lights to the left that I've had for about 17 years. And some of the bulbs have been changed, some of the fixtures have been changed, but it's just a baker's rack. I know that Aldi had them on sale pretty recently for maybe $40, but it's a baker's rack with adjustable shelves. And then the most important thing are the chains on there, because you have to move the lights up and down to the plants. So you always want the lights to be about 1/2 inch above the plants. So it's very important to keep them moving, or else you will have too skinny, spindly, leggy plants. And we just use a mixture of fluorescent lights with warm, cool, and one warm bulb. You can buy grow lights. I think we have a couple of grow lights in there, but they're more expensive. But if you have one warm and one cool, then you will have all of the spectrum of UV rays that are needed for those. And now I know there's so many different choices of lights, and we just have not upgraded our lights. Now, also, you will notice how close these seedlings are to the light. They're just about 1/2 inch under there. And you see they're also labeled with a piece of tape. So that's what you want, is them to be super, super close to those lights. Stop that for a second. Okay. And then, can I stop my video? Okay, I was checking to make sure that we were still recording. I'm going to pause. Okay. So you can see how close these lights are to the plant. Now here is a problem. You can tell that the lights are not quite under the plants are not quite under the light. And so they're growing leggy, they're growing towards the light. That's not what you want. You want them to be short and squat and growing right up under the lights. These are some Swiss chard plants that we grew, and can you tell that there's usually 3 little seedlings coming up in every spot? Swiss chard and beets are in the same family, and they are little clusters of seeds. So they have 3 seedlings per seed. You can tell over there on the far left, that's one of their little seed pods coming up. So these need to be thinned. You want 1 good, strong seedling in each little cell or each little growing space. And so you can go through here and use scissors and just trim them. And the good thing is you can eat most seedlings, and they're just like having little sprouts, and they're very, very good for you. So you can eat those, or if you don't want to eat them, you can give them to a pet, chicken, or anybody like that will eat those, or you can compost it. But most seedlings, except for probably tomatoes, you can go ahead and eat those little sprouts. These are coming up pretty sporadically. You'll see they're growing a little bit leggy, and the soil is pretty low, so they have a little ways to go. So these need thinning. They need to be under the lights closer, and I would have added more soil to begin with. I put this one in here because different seeds sprout at different times. So if you're starting them in a tray, you want to have seeds that are going to grow at a similar rate. So you don't want to put a basil seeds on one side and tomatoes in the other, because the basil is going to be much slower than that. And these also could use more soil, and they're not getting enough light, because you see how they're in there kind of long ways. They need to have the whole tray under the light. So those seedlings are going to have a hard time making it. You can tell in these little cell packs, you could pull these out. Some are sprouted, some are not. You could put them under the lights according to what they need. And some might need the lights raised, and some might need them lowered. More of those little Swiss chard seeds needing to be thinned. Do you use a dome or not? Domes work really well because they make a little greenhouse. You can see the water cycle happening in there, the droplets on the top. It's just like our terrariums we make here. And that will help those seed coats break open and your seedling germinate much faster. And then as soon as you see anything green under there, you want to take that dome off of there, or your seedlings will grow too leggy and it might get moldy or mildewy in there. We typically now will just use plastic bags instead of the domes, because the domes are for such a short time and they're pretty expensive. So we'll do the same thing with a plastic bag. You just make a little greenhouse, or somebody mentioned in our program earlier, like a little rotisserie chicken, little plastic thing that closes. That would be a good container to make a greenhouse out of. Here's our plastic bags, not very fancy, but as soon as we see something green sprouting, we'll take those off so they don't become leggy. And these are my little orange juice containers with moist soil. I put them in a tray so that'll catch the water and the water won't drip on my lights. I'm going to seal up that bag and leave it on there. These peppers have gotten too leggy because we left the dome on there too long, and so it should have been removed earlier. So that is an example of taking the dome off as soon as you see that. Now, when your seedlings are germinating, they don't have to be under lights. Most seeds don't need light to germinate, but they do need a warm area. Seedling mats will help you get that warm area, the top of your refrigerator, or maybe if you use a dryer a lot, or even if you have a wood stove back behind your wood stove where it's not too hot, can be a good place for germination. These mats truly do speed up germination by 3 to 5 days. It speeds it up a lot. So if you're in a hurry or you want them to grow faster, you can use that. Now, light, you want to have a daytime and a nighttime cycle for your plants. They say that nighttime is just as important as daytime. Usually 16 to 18 hours is what we try to get. And we have a timer, so I don't have to come in and turn them on and turn them off every day. They're just functioning by themselves with this little timer. We got an outdoor timer. You can plug a bunch of different lights into it. We have everything on a surge protector to try to help for fire. There's all different kinds of manufactured seed starting units you can get. This is one example of one. Do you see the lights go up and down? And that's what you want. This one is for one tray, but you could be creative. You don't have to have a big baker's rack. I've seen people put them under tables, under their shelf in the laundry room, all kinds of places. These are some that I think were outdoors, and they've got a little piece of plastic wrap on them, and that's making their little greenhouse. And then when it starts to sprout, they'll take that off of there. You'll see a fan in this picture. For your indoor growing areas, you're trying to emulate a little bit of what it'd be like outside. Indoors, it's very safe for these, but when they go outdoors, it's gonna be a lot harder. Sometimes the wind is really hard. It could be heavy pouring rain, sleet, all kinds of stuff. So the wind, if you put a little fan or air circulation in there, it'll mimic kind of outdoor wind, and that will help two things. One, get air circulating, not have as many fungus or disease problems, but also make your stems be a little shorter. So that's our goal, to have short stems. Currently, we don't have a fan on ours in the agriplex in the back, and they do fine, but I have done that with mine at home. So when a seedling starts to sprout, it has its cotyledon leaves, or its seed leaves, which are not the true leaves. When it gets its true leaves, that's when it's time to start fertilizing it. So you want them till it gets the true leaves that look like what the plant is. You can use a commercial fertilizer. Make sure you follow the directions for seedlings or vegetable transplants. I usually use fish emulsion. We use about 1 tablespoon per gallon and water them once they get those seed leaves weekly with the fish emulsion. This one's a 4-4-1. So it's got the nitrogen is the main thing they're needing in the beginning. It's got the nitrogen in there. Okay, so what if your seedlings don't look perfect? This is a leggy seedling on the left. It's grown too tall. You want it to be shorter and healthy with nice green leaves. On the right is a tray that's had too much watering. So you can overwater, you can underwater. You want to get it just right. You want to let them, every time you water them, then you want to let them almost dry out before you water them again. So you won't have to water them every day. I would suggest using a watering can like this. This is a narrow little pour spout. It works best. If you're just trying to spritz them every day, they don't get wet enough. I think soaking them twice a week is better than spritzing them daily because you want those roots to get nice and wet. Sometimes you might have trouble with fungus gnats. You want to use good, clean potting soil, not garden soil, not soil that's been reused. You want sterilized soil so you're starting from scratch so that you don't get eggs or disease in there. But sometimes you will get these little fungus gnats, and we found that just fly tape, the plain old fly tape, will trap those. I've tried other things, insecticidal soap, but fly tape seems to be the easiest. Just don't get stuck in it. Damping off is a problem that a lot of us have, and what happens is it's a little fungal wilt that gets right on soil level, and it actually kind of pinches the plant, it dies back, and it just deteriorates right there, and then it'll fall over. And so it is a fungal disease. You want to make sure that all of your pots, if you're reusing, they've all been soaked, cleaned, sanitized, sterilized with vinegar or a 10% bleach solution so that you, especially if you've had damping off before, don't get it again. One thing that we've had luck with is the chamomile spray. Chamomile is naturally antifungal, and you just basically make tea, really good, strong tea, and then once it cools off, you can put it in a spray bottle and spray it on there. You want to make new tea weekly because it will go rancid if you leave it in there. But it's a natural way to deal with the damping off. On these, you'll see they are overcrowded. They look like microgreens, but they're not intended to be. They just dumped almost a whole packet in each one. So you could go in here with scissors and thin out to your skin till you have one good strong one. But honestly, I think I would start over at this point. I think I would eat all these. There's some kind of brassica, eat them as microgreens and try again. So that is way too crowded. They're not going to make it. And then also, once you get them going, the next thing that you're going to want to do is harden off those plants. So when you're ready to harden off your transplants, that's when you're ready to plant them, but it's not quite time because their indoor environment has been a little bit different than what they'll encounter outdoors. So you need to take them little by little. It's best if you'll do maybe a day that's a little bit cloudy or overcast, not too cold. Go ahead and move them outside for a few hours into the sunshine, then bring it back in if it's going to be really cold. The next day, double their time out, maybe leave them for 5 or 6 hours, bring it back in. And then if it's going to be a pouring down rainstorm, just leave them inside one more day. And then the next day, bring them out, keep them longer. So watch your weather when you're hardening them off. If you don't do this, they will get sun scalded and it really sets them back. 2 even could kill them. So be careful with that hardening off process and don't rush. Just go ahead and harden them off. You can just start them in shade. Go ahead and move them outside, be in shade. That's one way to do it too. This is our hardening off table at the Agriplex. You'll notice we have a little cage, and it's because of marauding peacocks that like to come and decimate our transplants. If you keep them on the ground, you could have the same thing with rabbits or even dogs and cats. So I would be very careful where you put your transplants because you put a lot of time and energy into them, and you don't want them to get eaten off as soon as you move them outside. So do be careful with those. A great resource for seed starting is the new Seed Starter's Handbook by Nancy Buble. It is not new. It's got all of the information we've talked about today, plus so much more in it. So if you're interested in getting into starting vegetable transplants, herbs, flowers, I would definitely get this book. So it's available on Amazon or bookstores. So we are in zone 7A, I think is where we are. It changes a little bit, but that means that our usual last frost date in the spring is around April 15th. Our usual first frost date in November is around November 15th. Those dates are important when you want to figure out when to put out your plants. So one good resource is this Alabama Vegetable Gardener Guide for the Alabama Cooperative Extension. It has a really good little chart in it, this one, that helps you plan when to plant, what to plant, how much to plant. And it has some good dates on here as far as when to start them. The little asterisk means when that's ones you want to put out from transplant, not from lettuce. Not from seed. One that I like even better is in the Southern Exposure catalog, Southern Exposure seed catalog. And they're in Virginia, but they're also a 7. So it's similar to what we are here in North Alabama. But if you look, let's say cabbage, it says if you're going to direct sow cabbage, do it in the garden in March. But most of the time we would transplant cabbage. So to transplant it, you want to sow it indoors between January 31st and July 1st. So January 31st, that means, okay, if I'm going to start my cabbage in the spring, it's time to go ahead and get in the ground about right now, and then I'll have a spring crop of cabbage. Now, if you're going to have fall cabbage, that July 1st is the date to plant it indoors, inside, so you can have fall and overwintering cabbage. But I just find this one to be very easy and easy to read. So okra, direct sow, May 1st to July 1st. Eggplants, sow indoors, March 7th to April 21st. Let's look about tomatoes. Sow indoors, February 21st to May 7th, which usually I think about right about Valentine's Day or a little bit after is when to start. Same way with peppers. They say not to sow indoors till March 7th, but sometimes some of those hot peppers can be really slow. On your seed packet, it will tell on the back how many days till maturity. And so you can figure out with the germination and days till maturity, how long you need to grow those to set them out when you're ready. So where to buy seeds from? Locally, Chambers is a really good store that sells lots of different seeds close to us. Federer sells bulk seed and different seeds. Lowe's, Walmart, most of your home and garden stores will have seeds. If you want to order seeds and maybe you want something unique, this year we had a lot of luck with the little baby patio eggplants. They just were so prolific. They're tiny, the size of an egg, and we got tons of them. But that was something we had to order to get and start our seeds ourselves. So Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is the one that has the great chart I was just showing you. But then they also have seeds that are grown in Virginia, so pretty close by. And they have a little sunshine in there, and the sunshine means it grows well in really hot weather. So that fits well with Alabama. Seed Savers Exchange has tons of heirloom seeds. Seeds and Such had a lot of unique and different things. Johnny's is a great grower's guide with all kinds of information in there. I listed some others. Arnold Kaler is a retired experiment station director, and he came last year and did a program for us on his favorite suggestions of varieties. So we have that list available on our Facebook page. I'll try to put it up with a PDF of this as well. But Arnold's been growing in the Coleman area for 20 years and has lots of ideas of what grows the best. For those who are doing this live, we had a giveaway today of one of our seed starting kits. And if you have any questions, want to reach out, my email and phone number. This is a moonflower that my dad's been saving seeds for over the past 30 years that belonged to my great-grandfather. So neat thing about seeds, saving them, making your own vegetable transplants, herbs, flowers, is that you just have so much control on which varieties you have. So I'd strongly recommend that. So I wish you luck with your seed growing. Thank you for watching, and please get in touch with me if you have any questions. Thank you.